Good afternoon, conference attendees. Welcome to the open forum session where you get to ask questions of our team of subject matter experts. I understand this is one of our most well-attended sessions, and I can see that by the crowd. And it is our intent to be able to answer the toughest questions you have, hopefully, about federal student aid. It is also an opportunity for you to share suggestions you might have on how we can do some things better. We look forward to these discussions. However, before I introduce our panel of subject matter experts and take the first question or suggestion, I want to take the opportunity to introduce my executive leadership team that I briefly mentioned this morning. We went to a five deputy chief operating officer model, allowing for decentralized and more responsive decision making. The first of those deputies is Mr. Joe Lindsay, the principal deputy to the chief operating officer. This function unifies FSA's shared services, our acquisition, our finance, strategic communications, and management services and technology. Thank you, Joe. Mr. Chris Green is the deputy for student experience and aid delivery. Chris Green and his team will include all the student-facing products and services, including vendor oversight. The one you're probably most familiar with, Ms. Robin Miner. Robin is the deputy partner for participation and oversight, and she's known most of you in her new role as partner participation and oversight unifies the interface that we have with you and your staffs. Dr. Michael Dean is our deputy for strategic measures and outcomes. Michael's team, the Strategic Measures and Outcomes Office, merges our risk and performance function and is our internal heartbeat for audit and audit control. And finally, Mr. Dave Albers is our Deputy Strategy, Innovation, and Transformation. Dave and his team, the Strategy, Information, and Transformation Office, oversees next-gen federal student aid, the strategy, as well as most of our outlooking, futuristic kinds of innovations. Thank you, Dave. And now for the folks that really know your answers to the questions that you might have, the panel of experts. To my far left is Ms. Misty Parkinson, FSA's Customer Engagement. Mr. Craig Munier, FSA Policy Liaison and Implementation. Ms. Cynthia Hammond, Policy Liaison and Implementation as well. Anne Marie Wiseman, Office of Post-Secondary Education. Mr. Greg Martin, also of our Office of Post-Secondary Education. Pam Lealis, FSA Business Operations. And Ms. Ingrid Valentine from our Program Compliance Office. So with that, we want to open it up to all of your questions and suggestions. I would ask that you come to one of the nearest microphones and let us hear what you would like to ask. Yes, sir, at number 3.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for this opportunity. And I know most of the people up there and down there, and it's a pleasure to meet you, General. Before I read this article that I actually published on LinkedIn this morning, hopefully I don't have to. You got me, and I think many people, very excited by your opening this morning, which I also wrote about on LinkedIn. I mean, very exciting about the things that you're doing. So truly, and everyone should applaud, seriously.
Thank you.
I'm a little confused. Recently, the department said that you're going to require us to confirm with parents and students that with their debt and report that to the department. And then you have your income tool that is going to do that. Is that in addition to what we're required to do?
Right. The income,
I do not understand that.
Sure.
So basically, I'm not going to read this because I really encourage everyone to do that. Because at the end of my article, I basically recommend what you genius people have created. Why are you requiring us to do what you can do, and why are you requiring us to do and adding more compliance to us? And I have to tell you, as I say in this article, I'm not going to read this. What I say in this article, what you're requiring us to do is going to add burden to the student. They're going to have to do it twice, and the parent, they're going to have to do it twice now. And it's going to add cost to the institutions, loss of revenue, certainly a loss of cash flow. And guess what happens? That'll get passed on to the student.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question.
Hi, thank you for the question. Oh, very loud. So the Informed Borrower tool, which will be going live in April, I would encourage anyone that has interest in it to go to the Exploration Center in the resource room or session on NextGen. What we are going to be doing is having our borrowers confirm through each year, prior to dispersing the first disbursement on a loan, that they understand their debt and they understand their balance. Once that's done, a flags will be set into COD and tags will be put onto COD and sent to the schools, so the schools have the information so that they know that they can disperse. If it's not done, they will get a reject edit out of COD. An electronic announcement was posted last week on the 21st, and the new COD schema went out at the end of October to provide information.
So you're only going to require us to do it if the parent didn't do it, student didn't do it on their own?
Well, we would expect that the borrower or the parent would actually go on and confirm that they indeed understand what they are doing. So yes, it would be on that side, on this tool, as they are each year before the disbursements occur.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification, and that makes a lot of sense, so I thank you for that.
All right. Yes, sir, at mic number 2, I believe.
Thank you. Ooh, goodness, just like you, it's very loud. Daniel Berkowitz, Valencia College. Again, thank you, General, this morning for your comments and welcome. I want to echo what Howard said. I actually have 2 recommendations. One of them is, in the interim, since the department had not put forward this borrower consent idea, many states have implemented their own annual disclosure requirements. Florida is one of them. I'm required as a recipient of Florida financial aid every year to notify students of the amount of their indebtedness in a borrower notification letter. Now the department has put in something formally, I would advise or ask that you on our behalf notify the states that are doing this work, because it is duplicative. So my concern is, if evidently Florida is not the only state that has this kind of a policy, my concern is that if our information differs, we're going to be in deep trouble with borrowers in terms of what information. And so again, I would ask that, that we work in partnership to figure out how to dial back some of the state requirements now the federal government has taken this on. That's number 1. Number 2, my other concern is those students who do walk into the office on the day of disbursement who are in desperate need for funding. And I don't know, again, I'm holding back until we see the final process, because I know you are still developing this, and I have utter faith that you will do the best you can to get this done. This is not any sort of concern other than a warning for those students who are literally in the office in desperate need of money and refund. Will there be, or could there be, a process for us to have a printed confirmation that they've done the work and use that as an interim process until the COD schema, COD update gets sent back to us? I'm just nervous about the timing, because sometimes even a day delay is going to make matters really difficult for a student in that situation.
Yeah. Okay. Whoever arrives first. All right, number 1.
This is Chris Freeman from Noman. Is there any reason you couldn't hook this up to the FAFSA? So when they renew their FAFSA, it says, oh, you're applying for more aid. Let's review what you already have, rather than making it be a school thing that we have to wait till they get it done, because it's hard enough to chase down a student who's trying to renew their FAFSA. It's really hard to get them to do another step to try and get stuff before they get their money, and they don't understand.
I have a feeling I'll be taking back a lot of suggestions today. But as we embark on updating and modernizing the processes that our students and our parents have to go through, we will definitely take that back into consideration on a way to provide the information during the FAFSA time.
Right, it already captures a picture of how much they borrowed at the time they renew anyway. So it just makes sense to do it at that point before they can finish and submit the FAFSA rather than loading it onto the school's shoulders.
I think it's a great suggestion, and we will certainly take it back. And I guess my commitment to you and all of you on the suggestions on how to make it more efficient, that's exactly what we're looking for. So we'll write those down, and if there's a way to make it less burdensome on everyone and still create the objective, which is what we want, that the borrower understands what they're doing, then my commitment to you is that we will take a look and see if there's a way that we can do that. Number 3.
Hey, Keith Williams, Michigan State University. Quick question. Can you please clarify how the Inform Borrow tool will work for a graduate student pursuing both an unsubsidized Stafford loan as well as a Graduate Plus? Will there be 2 acknowledgments or just 1?
Do I need a...
There'll be 1.
1, yes.
Just 1? Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I don't know how loud that is, sorry. I just wanted to also echo some of the comments that have already been made, that I have gone to a lot of FSA conferences over my 15 years of being in financial aid, and this is one of the ones where I feel like there's a lot more partnership discussion.
Right.
I feel like it's the first time I've seen an FSA check-in at one of the hotels. So I feel like there's some more customer service on our end, and I appreciate it. So I just wanted to let you all know that I noticed. But back to some suggestions. There are quite a few states and even cities, municipalities that are requiring high schools to complete the FAFSA, and they're requiring like 100% completion. So with that, some of the biggest challenges for high schools are really parents. And not that they're a problem, but they are a problem. The reason is because they have to get the FSA ID. Sometimes there's a language barrier, sometimes there's a technology barrier. Lots of mistakes have been made, and then it's very hard to correct the FSA ID to get it for the parent. So it just makes it very arduous. So here's the big out-of-the-box suggestion, and no one's going to like it probably. But I'm wondering if we could look at not having dependency status. The reason I say that is because if we didn't have dependency status, we would not need the parent to complete the application for student aid. Not only that, but we wouldn't have the snafus with our DACA students or any of the students that have parents that are non-citizens. We would pretty much eliminate a whole bunch of professional judgment. Hundreds and hundreds of hours we spend as financial aid professionals trying to figure that out. We have, 8 questions that now determine whether you're a dependent or independent student. And we have to try to dig into these students' lives and find out if they're living in a car or if they're not living in a car. And we have to collect all this documentation just to prove if they're a dependent or an independent. Whereas if everyone was just a student and you didn't have that status, we wouldn't have to do any of that.
So if I understand the question, is there a way to eliminate dependency status on the FAFSA form? Who'd like to take that? Go ahead, ma'am.
We appreciate the suggestion. Unfortunately, that is not something that we could implement on our own. That is outlined, dependency status is outlined as a concept within the Higher Education Act.
Right.
So it would require a statutory change. And again, that's not something that the department itself could do. It would be up to Congress to make that change.
Okay, so one other suggestion. The other one is through iPads and through some of the reporting, high school data is already reported to state Department of Education and also to sometimes the federal Department of Education. So you have the students in high school's name, you have their date of birth, You have their parental information already in the high school systems. So I'm wondering if there's any way that you can push the FSA ID to high school students. Can the Department of Education take that data and just create, because that alone would be a huge hurdle and time savings for not only the high schools, but for the colleges. Thank you.
Right. So is there a way to push the FSA ID into our high school students, is the question.
Currently, the FSA ID is created once the SSA match is completed on the FAFSA. So we would be needing to come up with a way to work with our partners within FSA to determine if there was a way to create an FSA ID prior to the match.
Yeah, so it's an interesting concept. I think, again, we will take that one back and see. I don't know if we'll be able to do that, but certainly it's worth us having a discussion about. Yes, sir.
Ben Burton at Ivy Tech Community College. A quick clarification on foreign gifts. So do the gifts given to our affiliated foundations count in the calculation?
So you're asking the question on foreign gift reporting?
Yes.
So as the information collection is currently written, yes, gifts to foundations would also be reported as part of your reporting to the department.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, number one. I didn't see you there. Go ahead, ma'am.
Well, that's okay. On the subject of dependency overrides, why do we have two separate dependency override flags? Wouldn't one be enough?
Are you talking about a dependency override versus a homeless youth override?
Right.
I think that's for tracking purposes, really. I think mostly so that we're able to analyze our homeless youth population.
Have you found it helpful?
We've been able to respond to a lot of data requests, I know that.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Worley Keller with the National College Access Network. We do a lot of training on the FAFSA as well as our members do training to get ready for the October opening date every year. However, resource training materials don't seem to ever appear on the toolkit until this year, in many cases after the opening date. So our request is it possible, because we know the FAFSA screens are ready, to get training materials out a minimum of a month ahead of the opening day. Screenshots, opening the FSA demo site more than a day or two ahead of the FAFSA. Because if we're going to train people and we want everybody ready to go October 1, you can't post the screenshots in November. It doesn't work for training purposes.
Right, and we do understand your concern. We really, really do. Things like the printed materials, we would very much like to be able to get back to releasing those prior to going live. I think it's been the last 2 years where you've seen us posting that after the fact. It's very hard to make people who are not part of the process understand just how complex the process is on our side in order to get to that point. We really do our best, but there are a lot of things that have to occur before we're able to release anything out to the public. But we will continue to do our best and hope that we can improve on the timeliness going forward. As far as making the demo site available early, that is something that I think we would need an act of God to change. We make it available at the same time that we push out the code for the new application cycle, and that happens the Sunday prior to October 1st. We can't release it any earlier than that because of all of the things that we have to do in order to make it ready for our users. There's extensive testing, there's the development effort, there's the requirements effort and all of that. It's a very lengthy process. There's the security, scans, there's like all these things we have to do to make sure that when we release it to the public, it's gonna work It's going to protect people's data, you know, all of that stuff. And the Sunday before we actually go live on October 1st is the earliest that we are able to release that. But I promise you, the materials, the screenshots and things, we will try to get better.
Thank you.
So, ma'am, I'm gonna strap that one on for you. So the answer is yes, we're gonna do that.
Thank
All
you.
right, we're gonna do it. We're gonna make 30 days out. I think we're gonna do it to the degree that we don't violate any laws. How about that? So I think we will strap that on. We'll take that on.
Hi, Sandy Sarge with Sarge Advisors. I have two questions. The first one is, as the technology advances you guys are making are incredible, and I really commend everything that we were able to see over the last few days. And one of the things I'd like to ask is if you're contemplating a way to do away with the tokens in a sense that, you know, first of all, it's very cumbersome. I had an intern at a school that worked over the summer. It took over a month to get his token set up and working, so he lost 33% of his time to be able to be helpful to the team. So that's part of it, and in that, if you can do away or make that easier, can you also do the reverse where consultants like myself can have view only, literally don't want to touch anything on my clients' sites, but that they can submit my authorization. I have one token that I can get on if I've been given permission for a period of time to be able to access their data without them having to go to them to pull data so that they can send it back to me so that I can help reconcile or find the issue. So that would be one thing I would ask as a consideration on technology. And if you'll abide me one more comment, General Brown, yesterday you made a comment that I was very, very excited about, and I think it had to do with the $1.5 trillion of student debt we have, in which an average banking professional or loan professional would tell you that a third of that is considered bad paper right now. I would like to know what group under your administration can I literally go and stand in front of and say, please let me help, or please let me talk to you, or who's the best person in your group? Which group is the best group to begin to address that? And in our partnership stuff, what can we do to help?
Right, so let me take your second question first. Okay. So we are looking at portfolio review, looking as deeply into portfolio as we can. When I think I introduced Dave Albers, who has that part of our portfolio.
Dave.
And I think the two of you can have a conversation at least about what we've done thus far, early into looking at that portfolio review. Dave. The first part of your question, I think, would go to the table. Yep.
So as we move towards our next-gen PPO portal,
yeah.
Obviously we are going to move into new technology. One of the reasons the token exists is that it provides the two-factor security that we're required to do. So we would have to think about what that would mean and how we would achieve the two-factor security measures that's needed. So
I like the token. Just let me be able to put an OPE ID number in first. It goes back, says yes, you're authorized, or it says no, I'm not. Right.
Right, and that is part of the goal of the next-gen PPO is to allow that basically one portal for everyone to get into. Right. We will recognize you. We will know what you have access to, what you're supposed to have access to, and what you can and cannot do. Perfect. So that is basically right on where we're moving towards.
Thank you. Excellent.
All right. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Joe Pincus, University of Pacific. This is in regards to the informed borrower confirmation. It's my understanding after speaking to people at the Resource Center, everybody's going to be required to do it, whether it's your first time taking debt or not. So I'm wondering, and I've talked to other people, how come we just didn't combine it with entrance counseling? So we have one place to send them rather than two separate places to send them, so they could just take care of their entrance counseling and the inform all in one place. Since they're going to have to do it every year anyway, I just thought that would make sense. It's not my idea. I've actually discussed it with someone earlier today. Any thoughts to that?
So if I heard you correctly, and there's a lot of echo, so I'm not 100% sure I did, but if I heard you correctly, you're asking why we don't just include it as part of entrance counseling?
I like the FAFSA idea that the gentleman brought up earlier. That would be my wish list. But if you're not going to do that, at least that would be one place for them to go and take care of both.
Yeah, so entrance counseling is not every year, and it is only for first-time borrowers. And as you correctly stated, the Informed Borrower Tool is going to require confirmation every year for every borrower so that they can acknowledge how much debt they've taken out thus far. For the FAFSA, we can go back and look at that. I can think of some pros and cons, but I think we need to go back and have further discussions.
But the entrance counseling does bring up their debt and stuff. I mean,
it does,
it's similar.
But it's not every borrower
I'm just
every
thinking
year.
you could combine it, into something that works. But anyhow, I just thought I'd bring it up. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Tammy Tomford from Lincoln Memorial University. This morning we talked about the ability of having semester terms that were not substantially equal. So in your minds, if somebody does a term of 14 and 20, would the aid, including the loans, still be dispersed half and half? And would there be some latitude about not doing half and half? Because I can see some students, say, running out of money at the 20 and asking for more funds or a budget appeal.
Yeah, so what she's discussing is the electronic announcement we put out where we're allowing substantially more flexible or providing a substantially more flexible definition of standard terms. So whereas previously we had said that a semester would have to be 14 to 17 weeks in length, we're now saying it can be 14 to 21 weeks in length, and we are allowing you to have, we're not requiring that each semester be the same number of weeks. So as you pointed out, could you have one semester of 14 weeks and another of, say, 20 weeks? And the answer to that is absolutely. There are no unintended disbursement ramifications involved in this. You continue to disperse aid the same way you do now. Especially with loans, there's a statutory requirement that they be dispersed in substantially equal amounts. So you really, as far as having a 14-week semester and 20-week semester, I understand that intuitively people are going to look at that and say, well, that's a pretty big difference. So wouldn't there be a difference in costs between the 14-week and the 20-week? And the answer is, on the face of it, probably yes. And if you were doing a term-only loan, you would certainly look at the costs for that semester for that number of weeks. But as far as in the normal course of events, where you're going to do a loan period, say, well, make something up, August 29th to May 17th, inclusive of that entire period of time, the cost of attendance will be for that entire period. The loan amount will be dispersed in equal disbursements, or substantially equal. The only way to do it differently would be to do a term-only loan, which you could always do that if you wanted to account for the fact that the first term was 20 weeks. You could do a term-only loan for 20 weeks, inclusive of the cost for that 20 weeks, and then do another loan for the spring. That would be the way to account for that. But you couldn't adjust, if you're asking, could you adjust the disbursement amounts within the loan period in order to make up for the fact that one term had more expenses than another? No, you would not be able to do that.
I certainly think it's easier to divide them half and half, but you might want to think through that, just because I know we're going to have students and even faculty that are going to say they're going to run out of money this
Well, I mean, again, I think philosophically or theoretically, that's a great idea. We are up against statutory problems with that, and also the way in which a Pell Grant is calculated for standard term programs. It's just going to take the scheduled award divided by the annual award divided by the number of payment periods in the academic year, which will be 2, and give you that equal disbursement. So there's, as I said before, the instrument to account for that would be the one that we currently have, would be the individual loan period.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Yes, sir.
Thank you. NASFA recently issued guidance based on what the department said about retaking courses that a student has previously failed and letting financial aid, or rather previously passed, but letting financial aid pay for the second attempt. And I have a question about that. The guidance that NASPA shared from the department was that when you count retakes, you do not count times that the course was not paid for by federal financial aid. And that becomes very difficult for us to manage and mitigate, but the treatment's different transfer students versus non-transfer students. And I wonder if that's a statutory guidance or if that's regulatory, or where that guideline is coming from, and if it can be re-examined.
So the question goes back to retaking coursework, and NASPA had first of all, NASPA had confirmed with us prior to putting out that guidance. They contacted us, and the person in our office who's responsible for that, and confirmed that our previous guidance back from 2014, which I don't think got a lot of airplay because no one asked questions about it then, but that was essentially that for the purpose of paying for retaking coursework, you didn't have to include you have to count a course where Title IV-A didn't pay for it. We reconfirmed that, and then in the NASPA guidance, I think we did deal with transfer students, and so I want to say we got some questions about it, and I did reconfirm with NASPA, and I think if they haven't, they're probably going to put something out. I want to start by saying that this guidance in no way was meant to place any more burden on schools than you already have. In fact, quite the opposite. What it was supposed to do was, what it does do is give you the latitude within which you can give the student the greatest benefit of the doubt where that exists. We're not if you don't want to, we're not requiring you to look back. In fact, if you've got a course where that's where the student's already taken it twice, you are not required to look back and determine whether or not that course was paid for by Title IV. You can presume it was and move forward. If you have a course where the student's taking it for the third time and you want to pay, you do in that case have to go back and document that one of those attempts was not paid for by Title IV aid. Other than that, if you want to just do what you've always done, you can simply make the presumption that every attempt was paid for by Title IV aid. So there was no intention of placing any more burden on anybody. I apologize for any miscommunication that occurred that would have led anybody to conclude that. And I can see, though, that there probably was a little more explanation which needed to happen, and we've done that with NASPA, and I think hopefully here and other places that'll be resolved.
Thank you. That's very helpful, especially knowing it's an option. And as an optional basis, on a student-by-student case, I can see the opportunity to do that.
Right,
the way it read, it was a mandate, and that became
not
very
mandated.
difficult.
Certainly not mandated. And again, with the transfer student, it certainly would be extremely burdensome to look back at the other institutions and see whether aid paid for that course. If you really want to go that extra mile, you can do that, and you'd have to document that, same as you would at your own institution. But you can proceed as usual if you want to.
Thank you very much.
Sure, great. All right, microphone number one.
Hi, Anna Eileen, Nashua Community College. So last year at the open forum, I had asked about loan exit counseling because the department stopped printing the pamphlet, which then put all of the financial onus on the colleges. And what my question was then was, when we email a student that they need to do loan exit counseling, can we just email them the link to do the exit counseling instead of having to email or physically mail a PDF? And they were supposed to come back with an answer, and we haven't heard one yet, so I'm following up.
Sure, great question. So the question is, can they simply email the link for loan exit counseling? One minute, ma'am, we're conferring. And I think we're going to phone a friend. Let me see.
I apologize if we did not publicize that. We all had agreed that the answer was yes, that was fine.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And again, sorry if we didn't clarify that earlier.
Hey, good afternoon. Jamie Erlob from the University of Arizona. Quick question on the PPO. It's a new acronym. I was associated with something associated with healthcare on PPO. But this portal, my question is...
Let me just help you real quick. It's not associated with healthcare, for certain.
Sounds a bit like an HMO, PPO. With the portal, are we still going to be able to get access directly into COD and NSLDS? Because I frequently have, arguments with Siri because she's not giving me the answers that I'm actually asking for. And a lot of times when you try to combine several different very complex databases systems into one user-friendly, you often lose some of the functionality that you have in the individual systems.
Hi. So the ultimate goal of PPO Portal is for our partners to be able to get access to everything that they need to perform their jobs. So the data that you would receive and use today for both COD and NSLDS will all be through the portal. Initially, when the portal is set up, it'll most likely be links, but eventually it will have the data there in a. Now I'm going to get technical that I'm not very technical, but we will have a data lake and a technical way of serving up the data that's needed to support the schools.
Thank you.
Okay. Ma'am, number 3.
Jenny Duffy from the University of North Dakota School of Medicine. So with the revised policy on the extended term length, essentially, does the exception or flexibility still exist for periods of medical program work conducted outside of the classroom that meets all of the requirements in the FSA handbook? And so would the terms that include that clinical work not be required to be considered non-term even if it overlaps the term?
The answer to your question is yes, that guidance still applies. And when you look at the electronic announcement we set out, we at the beginning of that electronic announcement clarified that all of our previous guidance still applied. So yes, those clinical periods which extend beyond terms in a medical environment, medical education environment, you would still be allowed to exercise that flexibility, and which allows overlap to occur, whereas we would not ordinarily allow overlap with regular didactic coursework. So yes, nothing different there. We've just extended the length of a standard term, and we didn't intend in any way to pull back on any of our other flexibilities.
Okay, I have one additional question on the terms. We're looking at switching to a trimester basis program, and so for our final trimester, if the term is still within that 14 to 21 weeks, whatever it is, if the students, the final semester, fourth year medical students, if they completed their requirements, could they graduate? So essentially the term is still that long, but they would graduate before 14 weeks?
With any term, I mean, so you have that final term, and then students can complete prior to the. I mean, in order for a term to be I would say this, in order for a term to be a certain amount of weeks of length, if you say a term is 14 weeks or 18 weeks or whatever it is, in order for that to be a standard term, there has to be instruction offered throughout that term. So I mean, we don't, for instance, you could have a 15-week semester comprised of 3 5-week modules, and a student could complete that semester in the first 5 weeks, taking module 1 is all that student's taking, or he graduates after module 1. That's okay. What would not be permissible would be to say we have an 18-week semester, but there's no instruction ever offered past week 14.
What if 99% of the students graduate, but there is the possibility for students that don't?
Well, if some, I mean, I would say if instruction occurs, you say 99% of the students finish before the end of the
right, there's like,
term.
let's say we have modules, right? So then if a student doesn't meet the requirements to graduate at that time, we still, because it's clinical work, it's all in the clinic, so there is instruction that would happen. They would have the option to take a clerkship or
I would say just that, and maybe this is an individual situation where you're going to have to email me, but overall, I would say that if instruction is offered throughout the entire term, and there is the possibility for students to take instruction through the end of the term, then you may count the weeks. But beyond that, you can certainly send me an email at gregory.martin@ed.gov or david.musser@ed.gov, or both of us.
Okay.
And then David will answer it. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Yes, sir.
Thank you, General. Trevor Addison, Georgia Military College. I have one small suggestion, and that is let's get rid of the UEH 359 and 360 C flags. I think if the department were to look at the data on this, that you'll find the juice just simply isn't worth the squeeze. I don't think we're solving anything that we set out to solve when those codes were initiated. So if that will be a take back for y'all, I appreciate that.
Did you guys get that?
Yeah, I appreciate the remark. We'll take that back. I mean, just remember the whole UEH flag issue was to address an issue that got a lot of media attention a few years ago with Pell runners and people that appeared, at least on the surface, that were enrolling and withdrawing solely for the purpose of receiving Title IV aid. And it didn't take many of us to realize that that was going to erode public confidence in these programs that so many students depend on. So we'll take that back. Maybe it's time to take another look at it. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. At mic number 2.
Hi, yes, Sage from Southern Connecticut State. I have a request to look into. The Icer Code close to aggregate limits. I get them every day on students that are $15,000, $12,000, and the minimum is $31,000. So we're all doing a lot of extra processing on those students. So could we maybe look at what those flag limits are to try to get them actually close to the limits? Does anyone else agree in the room?
Yes, we will take a look at the flags.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Melissa Stevens from Western Connecticut State University. Can you please confirm for me where the students and the parents will complete the informed borrower tool? Is that on studentaid.gov as well? Same place they would do the entrance counseling and master prom note? So if you could just verify when they log in with their FSA ID, will it be one of the tasks they can complete, or will it reside somewhere else?
Yes, it will be one of the tasks that they will complete on studentaid.gov as they are completing their master promissory notes.
Thank you. My second question for you is there any consideration on alleviating some of the administrative burden of processing the return of Title IV aid after a certain period of time that's sooner than the 60% mark?
I'm sorry, you processing is sooner than the 60. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're saying.
We currently have to recalculate Title IV aid for students who withdraw or stop attending. There is a 60% mark of a term.
Oh, right, okay, I see that, yes.
So is there any consideration for reducing that period of time, maybe a freeze date, so that we are no longer required to do one after a certain earlier period of time?
That would require a statutory change because the statute is that once a student has completed, it's actually more than 60%, so it's 60 point whatever, it had to be above 60%. At that point, the student's considered to have earned 100% of his or her aid. So again, much like the dependency question was asked earlier, that would require legislation to change.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Amy Hooper, and I'm from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. First, I just wanted to echo the comments that were made earlier about how this feels more like a partnership and how wonderful that is, instead of feeling like there is accusatory language towards financial aid administrators who are deeply dedicated to their work. So thank you for that. And my question is about the shopping sheet, the college financing plan. I recently sat in a NASFA webinar that discussed how the department will stop updating the shopping sheet. However, the VA requires that as their tool. And my question is, are you in dialogue with the VA? Are you, now that there is yet another connection, is there a way to either have the VA use the college financing plan, or how are we going to handle that when that tool is no longer updated? I just feel that this is going to present a compliance issue at some point for schools.
Yes, we are in contact with the VA, and we are working on that issue.
Thank you.
Good question. At mic number 1, yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jennifer Garretson from Kent State. I was wondering about
the last question about exit counseling. You stated that we did not need to do a PDF attachment. We could do a link. Is there any way that you could provide an electronic communication about that, just to confirm and clarify?
We can certainly consider that. Thank you for the comment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Kim Jennerette, Cedarville University in Ohio. I think it was about 20 years ago, the legal guardianship question on the FAFSA was removed, and about 9 years later, it returned. I think it was about 2008. When we have applicants who complete the FAFSA and they check yes to the legal guardianship question, I'm going to tell you about 99% seem to be not in a legal guardianship, but in legal custody. And they need to hear that, y'all. And so as I work with families, they complete the FAFSA. We have to send them the information. Sorry, your paperwork shows family court of, domestic court of. And I understand why. They're going to a domestic court, a family court, not a probate court, because it's a family issue. The bottom line is that we as administrators are having to give them this information, collect additional documentation for dependency override, and we have to do this every single year. A legal guardianship situation, do it once, we get the documentation. You don't have to do that again the next year. So I contacted NASFA. I believe the two largest regions in the country, MASFA and SASFA. We put together a survey, sent out emails, about 115 to 120 responded. 99+%, if that low, do not allow for self-certification. We want to do it right. We get the information back from these schools, and virtually everyone requires it, and a great majority show the same thing. People who answer that question, applicants who answer that question, are not in a legal guardianship. By large numbers, they're in legal custody. They come from broken homes where mom and dad have been imprisoned, drug abuse. They have no idea where they are, and we're putting them through this layer of blocking them to higher education. If we're very serious about a partnership, and some of these people at that table have been friends of mine for years, and I know they're serious about it, but if we're serious about it as a whole, General, we will get that changed on the FAFSA. I don't care how it has to be changed. We will get that changed on the FAFSA. Read it however you want, but allow us as administrators to take in legal guardianship paperwork, legal custody paperwork, and effectively work with the students. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, Kim, I'm glad you brought that up. It's a very good issue, and the whole idea of the statutory term is guardianship, and I think that's why that wound up on the FAFSA that way. But I agree with you. In the vast majority of cases, it turns out it's custody, and I've even talked to a lot of states, and in many legal jurisdictions, it's the differentiation is so narrow, so thin that it's almost hard to tell the difference. And yet we have the statutory term guardianship. And I understand where you're coming from, and we have tried to push this issue in the past, and for whatever reason, it's kind of stalled. So I think what we can commit to here is to take it back. We'll talk to our Office of General Counsel and see where we can go with. I don't know whether the term can be changed on the FAFSA, but certainly seeing whether custody can be considered to be the equivalent of that. So we definitely will look at that, and I thank you for bringing that to the forefront again.
Greg, thanks. And if we can't get that guardianship verbiage word changed on the FAFSA, perhaps in the instructions, guardianship can be further defined as a situation to what I just described.
Right. We'll certainly look into that because it's an excellent point.
Thanks, guys.
Good. Yes, ma'am.
I have the same issue as Kim did, except for we also have students who say, yeah, I am in the legal guardianship of my mother, or I am in the custody of whomever. So there is a little bit of a challenge with getting that right. I understand that. But we do have a lot of students who answer that question and answer it incorrectly. I'm Joan Xanders from Northern Virginia Community College. I was intrigued this morning by Secretary DeVos's suggestion that FSA be separate from the Department of Education and have its own board. I'm curious as to how that would work. I doubt if that idea was developed in a vacuum. General Brown, can you give any clarification at all to what that proposed structure would entail? Would it be a privatized entity? Would it still be part of the government?
So I can give you just some very, very early kinds of conceptual things. So because it's conceptual at this point, but still governmental. We're talking about a governmental agency. The difference that the Secretary made was that it was independent of the Secretariat. So it was not a part of the Department of Education. It was more like a regulatory agency with the objective of it being apolitical and then having a professional board oversee it, given some of the aspects and context of federal student aid now, which is a very large financial portfolio with all the same implications that you would have with the bank. But I do want to emphasize that it's very early in concept, and I think she introduced it today as a conceptual right thing to do.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi. Thank you. Thank you, General Brown. I'm very happy to be part of the FSA community. I've been doing it for 30 years. My name is Tanya Parker-Jones, and my comment or my question is that many times we're working with new institutions that are applying for financial aid for the very first time. And in some of the requests differ from one regulatory aid, one region to another. One in particular that kind of gets me is the net price calculator, which is a template for 16-17 and 17-18. And many schools have to go through that process on an annual basis, as well as new institutions. And I just want to find out what the purpose is of doing it for 16-17 and 17-18 when we're looking at a more recent award year.
Yeah, net price calculator. All right, not all at one time. Hold on a second here.
So this actually is not something that FSA itself does, but we will take that back to the department and get you an answer.
It's a good question, though. We will take that back for sure. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So I have another question. Consumer information regulations. I am just wondering if they are going to really be reviewed for the amount of administrative burden they put on the colleges, and are they really even accomplishing the intention? I know I send my email out to the students. I have my web page. I've never had a student look at any of that. And there are so many regulations that I can't keep up with them. And I know many other colleges feel the same way. And I just would really like to see some help in that area. That if we're going to put stuff out, I want it to benefit the student, not just be a burden on us.
Yeah.
Some of those items are regulatory, some are statutory. We've undergone quite a review of our regulations and look to change things that we can change within our control. We've tried to review guidance, any sub-regulatory guidance that we have, to streamline the processes that we have in place, and we will continue to look at those things. So we appreciate the comment and know that we are taking those back, and we are looking at anything we can where we can reduce your burden.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Number one.
I always have a question. So this is actually an application question. And it's not really a question, it's more like we've noticed that the section in which household members are being determined, you know how you guys changed it so it's like, okay, it's you and your parents? That's a little confusing for some of our students. They get really confused about the parts that are grade and then where they have to put in numbers. So I didn't know if that was something that anybody else was experiencing or if it's just our students. So I thought I'd ask about it since nobody was up here.
I'm not sure you're getting the answer that you want from everybody else, but I will tell you that we are identifying areas within the FAFSA to do some usability testing, and that is actually an area that we are planning to get some user feedback on.
Good. Yes, ma'am.
Elaine Rubin from Advisors. I just had a question on cancer deferment. For those loans that aren't considered eligible because they were an in-school or in-grace, could consolidation help them become eligible?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I have another question specifically related to sex at birth and gender and questions on the FAFSA. Schools are now required and are maintaining information about students' preferred name and how that relates to data matching with the FAFSA and all of those complex issues. And I'm wondering what's going to happen going forward as we continue to progress in terms of appreciating and understanding persons in transitional gender, how we're going to help, how you are going to help the schools handle those kinds of situations. Are students going to be able to put preferred name on FAFSA, handling pronoun preferences, et cetera, and what your thought is about dealing with those issues?
Yeah.
So from a data matching standpoint, we match with Social Security Administration, and it has to be a pretty good match for it to actually match. So it's going to, I'm not sure what we can do. Anything?
So ma'am, your question is gender preference, right? Or if you want to use a category that's not on the form, is that?
Right, so currently, I believe with federal identification, students can put X as a gender, and now institutions that's being built into softwares, financial aid management and student management softwares that schools are using. And I'm just thinking about a situation that recently occurred at our institution and how we're going to handle going forward, making sure that we are respectful of the students' wishes, and particularly for undergraduate students or for students who have not yet come out to their families, making sure that we can, without being overly intrusive, match data, give us another element to use beyond Social Security number, date of birth, and then will there be a question on the FAFSA that says gender identity of X as opposed to male and female, or those kinds of things?
So for the selective service match, we would still need the gender. However, I believe if it's left blank, we would still do the match. So we could take that back and see how we could work with that.
Yeah, I think you asked a broader question. That's a very good one that we're going to have to answer eventually one way. So let us take that back, and we will get and publish an answer on it. Yes, sir.
So I have a question about the uniform guidance that was issued associated with the A133 that went into effect. So what we're being told this year by our auditors is regardless of the sample size, whether it's 10 or whether it's 240, that if there are more than 2 errors, that it has to be reported to the Department of Education. So that seems like a very low threshold, particularly for some very manual processes. And I just had a question about how that relates to the financial aid side of the 133.
So can you repeat that one more time?
Yes. So we do, our auditors for the first year are telling us that under the new uniform guidance that was issued associated with the A133, that they no longer have any flexibility with regard to looking at error rates, that if in fact there are more than 2 errors in any process, that process would get an audit citing, and that's coming out of the new uniform guidance associated with the A133. So for example, you know, we do a large number of R2T4s, we're a community college, and if there is more than 2 errors associated with any of those R2T4 calculations, which we all know is very manual, then that will trigger a new audit finding for the Department of Education.
So consensus is that it's a single audit issue and that we have no control over that.
Okay, even though the Department of Education is folded into the backside of that with the audit compliance supplement, this would all be over to OMB.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, hold on.
Just
hold
to
on.
clarify, the requirements that the Office of Management and Budget put out are their processes. How we handle it internally regarding the response, that's the department. That's where we come in.
Right, so we're gonna, so if there's more than 2 errors, I mean, they can audit 240, and if they find 2 even unrelated errors, that will trigger an audit finding that will go to the department, and then you guys will decide how you want to deal with that, right? And that's where.
That's correct.
All right, great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. This, Molly Garrett with Tyler Junior College, and this might be statutory, so if it is, I apologize, but I'm not sure. So it's more of a wording on the FAFSA, and I know that everybody's really wanting to allow for fewer questions, and this is going to add more questions, but we have a lot of problems with the students and their parents that they're actually supposed to report on the FAFSA. So when it says, what are your parents' marital status? Well, they automatically go to divorced because their biological parents might be divorced, even though maybe one of the parents remarried. So my suggestion is that instead of asking that question, maybe we ask, do you live with parent 1 and parent 2, or do you live with just parent 1? And then what is marital status of just parent 1 if they only leave us with 1 parent? And then that way maybe we get the correct parental marital status and the correct parents on the FAFSA. Thanks.
Good input.
Thank you for your feedback. We introduced the concept of the FAFSA parent in the mobile app when we released the mobile app, and I'm not sure if that's something that you have had a chance to take a look at. If not, if you want to go to the Resource Center, you can take a look at it there, and we also released screenshots in a PowerPoint presentation on October 17th, I believe, so you can take a look at what that looks like there as well. What we were hoping for is that we would get some good feedback about whether that improved students' and parents' ability to correctly answer the questions, because we want to also extend any improvements that we believe that we made with the mobile app to the website. We're in the process now of talking about improvements to the website, and one of the things that we're specifically looking at is the concept of the FAFSA parent and how we want to get that, how we want to communicate that to people so that they're understanding what we're asking before they start answering the parent questions. We actually are going to be doing a focus group here at the conference tomorrow, and we are looking for people who would be interested in providing us with feedback about a couple of topics, and one of them is exactly that. Okay. So if you think you would be interested in coming, maybe engaging with some other people to hear their thoughts, as well as sharing yours, if you could come up after this session is done so I can take down your contact information, then we can hopefully include you in that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, ma'am.
Just Morley Keller from NCAN again. Just wanted to confirm that we're still on track for the DRT to kind of handle the Schedule 1 question next year. And then also, if that's going to happen, what would it look like on the FAFSA if we still are in the situation where folks like married filing separately can't use the DRT? So is the question going to be on the FAFSA and/or on the confirmed through the DRT?
The Schedule 1 question will be treated the same way as the other questions that we're able to get answers from the DRT. So similar to AGI, taxes paid, if somebody uses the IRS DRT for 21-22, then a response will come back to the Schedule 1 question, and therefore they will not have to answer it on their own. However, for anybody who can't use the IRS DRT, the question will still be there, and they will be required to answer it if their income is below $50,000, and they may therefore qualify for the Simplified Needs Test.
And if a family uses the DRT, answers the question on the FAFSA and then uses the DRT and it doesn't match?
That would not be possible.
Okay.
Yeah, that question is only displayed if they've already assuming they're a tax filer.
Okay.
They've already reported their AGI, and it's less than 50,000.
Okay, so it's going to come in that subset of questions.
Correct.
It's not going to sit out separately.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Go right
Hi.
ahead.
I'm Sally Andricki from the College of the Marshall Islands. And on the FAFSA form, the independent age is 24, right? So I was wondering if Department of Education has like a plan to submit this to Congress to lower the age from 24 to 21 or 18, as like in March 1971, Congress was able to approve Amendment 26.
Any movement to change the age from 24 to 21?
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but unfortunately that too would require a statutory change. That is not something within the department's control.
Just a suggestion to give to Congress. Thank you.
No, I think ma'am, I think it's a good suggestion, and we'll take that. So it's statutory, but we have a process by which we can ask a question, right? So we'll ask a question and see where it goes.
Thank you.
In regards to the loan borrower consent for schools operating under BBay versus award year, will we need before each BBay or just once for the award year?
So your question is, it will be award year based, so it will be beginning next award year. Is that?
So if we have two loan periods, so we have 3 semesters with a crossover, so will it be for every 2 semesters or just once for the award year?
It would
June
be
to
for
July through June, or?
It would be the beginning of the award year. So if you have semesters that cross, it would be, it would start with the beginning of the award year. So there could be some disbursements that are caught up in when we go live in April for that award year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Orion Trunk from my computer career. I just had a couple thoughts with the partnership aspect of the conference, which has been really great to see the partnership mentality. And I noticed a lot of the answers were of the statutory referencing and things like that. I was just curious if there's something we can do as financial aid administrators to maybe either develop a coalition of here's our concerns and then we can express them to you rather than a one-on-one basis. We could have kind of a group mentality to help submit that, to help with the partnership between you guys, so you don't have to do it all by yourself.
You would certainly be welcome to do that. I know that many of the professional associations are already leading those types of efforts, so we would probably direct you to there first to try to take on those kinds of things. We know that many of the associations have annual Hill visits and things like that where they're already engaging with congressional staff and/or members. So you are certainly welcome to do that type of thing. We, as department officials, are not able to direct you to certain places, but again, if your professional associations do that, we would certainly be interested in having those kinds of discussions with you in terms of ideas. If we can be of assistance to you, we would certainly do that.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, Vera Riddick, Old Dominion University. Going back to the Parent Plus loan and the DRT retrieval tool, I guess my question is, what type of checks are in place for parents when they are deceased? So, for example, if a student used a parent for a Parent Plus loan 1 year, the next year that same parent, someone is using that particular PIN number to get in to apply for their MPN. And I'm thinking that it should be checking their Social Security number. So what type of checks are in place to avoid that?
So we do have a check with the Social Security Administration. So if the parent had passed away, that we should know that, and that Parent Plus loan would then be stopped.
I think we need to verify that because that has happened twice, and the parent had been deceased for 3 years when we noticed it. So, and I'm just throwing that out there because it was just by chance that we caught it, and it's not something that's easily caught. So, but I do want to just throw that out there that that's not it doesn't appear that there's a good check in place with Social Security numbers for parents that are using a.
That is helpful information. If you can come up afterwards and give me your contact information so we can get some more details of that situation, we'd like to investigate that.
Sure.
Thank you, ma'am. Number 2.
Good job. I thought that was a great idea, too. So just out of curiosity, the gentleman who brought up B-Bay made me think of SA and B-Bay. Is there an opportunity to do away with that distinction? And some of you know this story maybe, but I had a son at a state school, wanted to do summer courses, decided after the spring term that he wanted to go in and take summer courses and was told he had no more aid. And I work with proprietary schools that do 30-week AYs and then just rolling all the time. And I was like, no, that can't be right. I literally made the Department of Financial Aid at Northern Colorado University call me because I was like, what? And sure enough, their SSAY denied him the opportunity to go to school because he had no aid. So is that statutory? Are you going to tell me it's
no? So you have two types of academic years, and
Yeah.
when you're talking about scheduled, the SAY you're referring to is a scheduled academic year and a borrower-based academic year.
Right.
So a scheduled academic year would be the normal course of event. We're talking about a traditional college calendar here. So fall, spring would be your scheduled academic year, and then you have to treat summer. If you use a scheduled academic year of fall, spring, you have to have summer have a status. Summer's, I always say if I'm training new people, it's an orphan. It doesn't belong in the scheduled academic year, so it has to be either a header or a trailer. In the vast majority of cases, though not always, the school will make it a trailer. So if a student goes in the fall and spring and you have an annual loan limit, whatever that is, and the student receives disbursement 1 in the fall, disbursement 2 in the spring, if the scheduled academic year is fall, spring, summer as a trailer, then that summer is attached to that scheduled academic year. At that point, that student has used his or her entire eligibility. Now, the school does have the option, and I want to point out the option. They don't have to do this.
Right.
They could, if they wanted to, say, we're going to start, as long as the summer wasn't included in the loan period. So I did my loan fall, spring, not fall, spring, summer. But summer's attached to that scheduled academic year. I could, if the school wanted to, they could begin a borrower-based academic year with the summer. Then that borrower-based academic year will be summer, fall. They would do another one some spring, summer, and then they can rotate the student back to SAY. But we do not require schools to do that if the student requests it. There's good reason why a school might not want to do that. Remember, if you do that, you're very much squishing or front-loading that student's total thank you, aggregate loan limit up front. And so some schools don't want to do that, and I can understand. There are very valid philosophical reasons not to do that.
Right.
But I think that having both of those options does give schools a great deal of flexibility with BBAY and SAY, and we don't encourage or discourage the use of either one.
The issue with it, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that, but quite frankly, the borrower is the one on the hook for the loans. And if that kid wants to take classes, my kid was a music major considering medical school. He wanted to take all his science classes in the summertime, so he had options. He was thinking it through. He just needed the aid to do that one term, However, now you just spent time, I understood everything you said. I could not get them to understand to open it up, and quite frankly, he'd be in here telling you how mad he was if he wasn't in graduate school.
They might not, and to be frank with you, there might be some schools that don't understand they can do that.
Right.
That's a possibility.
Right. That's exactly right. So do away with it, and you know what? Quite frankly, we haven't raised the aggregate limit in 150,000 years. We might want to be thinking about that.
Well, that would be statutory.
I know. So we went 1965 from 1,200 per year to 28,000, and when was the last time we raised it? So just a point on your connections with Congress, talk that over with them. Do away with SSY, get rid of it, let the borrower be responsible for his responsibility. We're making him responsible everywhere else.
We can take back the suggestion to look at SAY and BBAY again.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
I think we've got time for two more, number 3 and then number 1.
Thank you. Just again, a follow-up on BBAY. That was my colleague that asked the question, but I have a follow-up. So you defined, as it should be, the award period July 1st to June 30th. So let me just sort of put out the exact situation. So at our institution, for example, we have fall-winter semesters, and then the next one would be winter-spring, and then we would have spring-fall. So that spring-fall would be that student's BBAY, and that spring student would not need to do the disclosure. We would not have to do the new requirement. Would that new requirement be needed for the second disbursement of that same loan? Because that would be after June 30th. No, it's the same
I'm not sure I
loan.
get the question.
Okay, Greg. Okay, so in other words, we're talking about the new requirement to disclose to the student parent that their debt.
Oh, he's talking about.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So it's not required, it's a spring-fall loan, it's a spring-fall BBAY, it becomes before June 30th, so we don't have to do it for the spring portion of the loan. It's the same loan that's going to be dispersed in the fall, which is after June 30th. That's the second half of a loan that's already dispersed. It's going to be required for the second half of that loan that's already been half dispersed.
So it is award year based, and it's for the first disbursement for each loan.
But that first disbursement's already been made for that loan before June 30th.
Right.
So is it required for the fall?
So I think we're
going to phone a friend
an
in
input
this
from
case.
the floor here.
Aha.
Hi, everyone. Is this on? Yeah. Hi. I'm Ian Foss. I work with the Informed Borrower tool. And you're right that there are going to be situations where you're going to possibly need to do an acknowledgement in the middle of what you might consider your academic year, SAY, BBAY, what have you. But every loan that you disperse is associated with an award year within the COD system. And that's the award year that we're talking about. So if you have a loan that's coded as being for the 2021 year, you're going to have to do the acknowledgement for the first disbursement of that loan for that year. And if the second disbursement of that loan happens to be in the next July 1, but you still have it coded within this COD system as a 2021 loan, then you don't have to do the Informed Borrower tool confirmation process for that second disbursement.
Do not or do?
Do not.
Do not, okay.
It's all tied with the award year that you report to the COD system with every loan.
Thank you. That answers my question. I knew that was going to be a difficult one. That's why I needed that clarification. My other question is, what's the time frame of getting the student parent to see that debt and to certify that they have seen the debt prior to the disbursement? Do we have 30 days, 60 days? Can we do this 4 months ahead of time?
It's completely up to you how you choose to design your confirmation process to interact with the informed borrower confirmation process. Our only requirement is that the confirmation be completed before the loan is actually dispersed.
Okay, and just letter C of that one question is, okay, so the student parent did not do it based on, I assume you're going to be informing the student parent, or we're going to be informing the student parent that this tool is available, they have to do it. You're going to tell us the student parent did not do it. Do we send them to the tool to do it, or do we have tools to send the information to you that we have proof that they did do it? What's the communication here?
Students must use our tool on studentaid.gov.
Okay.
That is the only way that they will be deemed to have acknowledged their debt, for lack of a better term, for the award year.
We have to direct them to your tool.
Correct.
Okay, so there's no way that we could update you globally that they've done it otherwise.
So
correct.
Because we're running short on time, I think further conversation on this can happen in one of the sessions we mentioned on the informed borrower tool,
thank you.
and also in the resource center.
Are you sure you want me to ask a question at this time?
I am. Go right ahead.
This is another application question. Sorry, I'm getting away from loans. Why are people able to say yes to both the filing a foreign tax return and Schedule 1 that throws that common code? Is that something that maybe will go away? Because you wouldn't do both, would you?
Sorry. Thank you, Craig.
We do that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah. So the logic in both FAFSA.gov and the mobile app prevents that from happening. So if you're seeing that happening, it should only be if somebody's filing a paper FAFSA or if the FAFSA is being submitted through some other system. If you're seeing instances where that's happening and the transaction is from FAFSA.gov or the mobile app, we would need to see some examples so we could do some research, because we have skip logic in place that would prevent that.
Okay, so our question is really coming from preparing for 2021 and considering that common code, but knowing that it won't happen if they're doing it online.
Correct.
That's good to know. Thank you.
That's correct.
And then just one really quick clarification, and that is, am I correct now that if a parent is separated and filed married filing separate, or I think I noticed this, they can use the IRS DRT now if they're separated and filed married filing separately?
It depends on the marital status date.
Okay, thank you.
All right, how about we give a round of applause for our panel? Thank you all very much, and please enjoy the rest of the conference.